Next up, we have one of our demos that we're really excited about. This is going to be Shawn Wallace and Emily Wilson from Unruly Studios and from Unruly Splats.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to let Shawn introduce himself first, but we're from Unruly Studios. Super excited to talk to you all today.
Hi, I'm Shawn. I'm the head of product and engineering at Unruly.
And my name is Emily Wilson, co-founder and COO at Unruly Studios. And today we're going to be talking about combining active recess-style play with block-based coding. But before we dive into that, we're going to do a little bit of an overview. I don't know where the best place for me to stand is. I'll stand over here. We're going to do a little bit of an overview of just how we work with schools so it can provide some context for the curriculum and coding things that we're going to talk about. So the way we work with schools is an all-inclusive model. So it includes software, so site-based licenses for the school hardware, the Splats themselves, which I think everybody's excited about. Support with basically anything, classroom materials, and access to community events that we run well, I guess it's now international, with that are online and are actually in-person competitions, which we're going to be talking about more. And the reason that we do this is to bring as many entry points for computer science into the day as possible. Many of the schools that we work with, we are the very first coding thing that they're ever doing. And so we think it's really important to provide as many potential entry points and just make it as easy as possible to do this. And what this ends up looking like is it looks really different, not only within a classroom of the hardware element of Splats, where there'll be, 6 to 24 Splats within a room, so the physical space changes, like chairs are moved out of the way, tables are moved out of the way, and your classroom might be transforming based off of the game that you might be playing. But it also changes the school as well, because that means that you're going to be seeing coding in places that you might not be used to seeing it, with teachers that might not be used to doing it. So that's just a general overview of how we work. And what this looks like in classrooms throughout the day is that it might mean that there are students that are playing or building their own code with block-based code on either an iPad or a Chromebook, and then playing them in real life with the Splats in the room. And you may ask, why? Why do all of this? It seems like a lot. And one thing that we've discovered is that it's really important to provide as many touch points, not just because we think that it helps to build STEM programs that really stick within a school, but also gives more touch points for students, like as many of us in the room might know, means that more opportunities for positive associations with STEM and really helping to form strong STEM identities. So if you're able to see coding in a place that you already can see yourself in, it provides a lot more entry points for you later on. So let's talk about Splats.
Yeah. So this is a Splat. It's a big button, lights up, makes a lot of sounds, but it's also a Bluetooth device. So the way you would use this in the classroom is you would have up to 6 of these at a time. You'd connect them all to the app, and create kind of a Bluetooth network. And kind of unlike some of the maker-oriented platforms, you're not actually uploading any code to the Splat. You are basically the Blockly code that gets executed is sending events and messages to the network of Splats, and it's sending button presses back. Although we don't really call them button presses, we call them Stomps, because usually these are often on the floor, and they get stomped a lot. And Stomps are kind of our most important metric also in our health score. You want to go to the next one?
So this is our workspace, and so as you'll see the Blockly code that's up on the screen. We also have a big effort right now in bringing a lot of our classroom materials into the app. So that lesson plan tab up at the top actually pulls down the lesson plan. And we're laser focused right now on just providing, again, more materials for teachers in all of those different spaces throughout the day in a much more prescribed way with more direct tie-ins.
Go to the next one, maybe. So this is an example of a lot of our curriculum to date has been kind of phys ed based, so kind of bringing coding into phys ed. But we just worked on a whole math curriculum. So this is an example of how you might use Splats in a math course. This is like teaching places. And so the way that this code works is you would stomp in Splat 1 and get a random number, and you'd also I didn't hook it up. I mean, it doesn't matter. You also get a cow sound. And so the name of this game is Cow Computer. Yeah, thank you. And you'd step at Splat 2, get a divisor, and Splat 3, get the answer. And you can go to the next one here. So you can kind of see we have like a very minimalist toolbox, and it's kind of by design. So like the sounds and the lights really do a lot of heavy lifting, because all the games are really just, the logic of the game, sounds, lights, the configuration, and then we have scoring on top of that.
Yeah, one thing we like to say a lot is the rules for the game are the rules for the code. I can start off here. Yeah. So like I mentioned before, a big part of what we do is events. So they're typically competition-based events. So they'll be happening locally on an individual school's campus. And we'll go and track actually and make leaderboards for most frequently Stomps, but we've also done blocks of code as well. It's super exciting, and we have it's become a really big part of what we do to really drive engagement. But it also means that it's had some interesting implications product-wise too.
One thing you might notice here in the Go Bananas event, you'll notice we're tracking yellow stomps. So we actually, in our analytics, we track, so what a yellow stomp is if you write a computer program that turns a spot yellow, whenever it gets stomped, your school will get a point. And then we have leaderboards that kind of track those, and different styles of leaderboards, as you can see here.
Yeah, and one thing we've also started to do too, so we do have 4 pillar events that happen every year, and they're different themes based off of the time of the year. But we've also started working locally with different school districts to run custom events and competitions too, which has been really fun.
Another thing that I think is kind of interesting about our platform is our file format. So we have so everything we call them Unruly notebooks. And informally, we kind of call them as baby's first Jupyter notebook, and they're kind of rich text files. So everything's so your project's a notebook, lesson plans are notebooks, the scope and sequence would be a notebook also. We can go to the next one. And we, as part of our approach, we're kind of heavily using web components and making custom elements. So notebooks are actually custom HTML elements, and this is how we might embed a Blockly code in a notebook, and it would kind of render itself as a button that would load the code. Go to the next one. And here are just a couple more examples of custom elements. So all of our virtual Splat is a custom element, and the leaderboards are actually custom elements also, kind of backed up by a service on a Lambda service. Let's go next. One thing we're working on, like everyone, we've been trying to figure out what to do with large language models and natural language agents. So we have like 4 things that we've been experimenting with, and here are 2 of them. One is as a block code debugger, and so we have a little. This is using the OpenAI API, but we found that GPT actually has a pretty good understanding of Blockly XML, kind of right out of the box. So with just kind of a little prompt engineering, we found that we can kind of take, what you expect your code to do. This is a common error for beginners, where it's doing a test, but it's falling through the stack. And actually, GPT, in this case, got pretty much nailed it, and GPT-4 does even better. Next slide. And then we're also playing around with using it as a block code generator. So in a similar way, you can, this one in particular had a little bit of history explaining some of our custom blocks, but it actually nailed it, second time, actually. And I added the say block, so it was a collaboration here. I think that's it for now.
We did so good on time.
Yeah, 6
That's
seconds.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I will start with the first question, which, Shawn, you told me the answer earlier. How many stomps did you just reach recently?
We're on the order, we're somewhere between 17 and 20 million.
That's awesome. Very cool.
And we would have had more if it wasn't for the pandemic.
So cool. All right. If there are any questions in the room, make your way to a mic. I see Blake approaching. Maybe Mary Beth.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what's like the wear and tear on the actual device? Like, do you have like a certain number of stomps that is like the life of the device, or do you have an idea?
Yeah, we don't really have the number, but we're they get some love, and you know, it kind of and we kind of set ourselves up sometimes because some of these events are they're competitions. We call them stompetitions. So you know, with 3 million stomps, but part of the service or part of the platform is everything's warranted. So we send out new splats and we'll. So you're never if one breaks, you just send it back to us. And
Yeah, we had a problem at the beginning where everyone was being really precious with the splats, and we didn't like that. So we had teachers that are even like instructing students to take off their shoes before stomping on the splats. We're like, no. So now we really, like Shawn said, we kind of encourage the worst treatment of the splats possible.
Cool.
But overall, not a huge problem.
Awesome. Mary Beth?
Can you describe, like, I don't know, your favorite game that you've seen students create with the splats, just to get an idea of like how they use them?
Yeah, like a lot of the PE games are, you know, kind of based on, you know, relay races and stuff like that. I think I don't know one of mine was just seeing in class they had a bobbing for apples game. And so a splat would turn red, and you would have to hit it with your head, which
Yeah. I think like a classic that we just keep seeing like different versions remade a lot is like a trick relay race. So you set up splats and you run in between the two of them, and then whenever you run and stomp on one, it'll change a random color, but you can actually tie in some really great concepts by you can only get a point if it's a certain color, or only if you do a certain pattern. You can also tie it in with concepts really easily too. So we've seen that game be used in math a lot as well. I think like more outside the box, one of my favorites has been like a zombie infection game where you actually picked up the splat and carried it around with you, and then you would actually press, so there's buttons on the back, and students were like carrying them around the room and then like infecting each other, and then you would like indicate to others that you have been potentially contaminated. It was lovely. So I liked that one too.
There's also this kind of a subgenre of circular games, and one that I like is it was basically a train. There's a train sound, so the train would go from splat to splat, and you'd have to stay on top of the train, and if you fell off, you would lose, and it would speed up. But you could work in like use the remainder block to kind of figure out, and you're literally doing a loop. So I like that one.
Very cool.
My other question is, we have a break eventually. Can we stomp on the splats?
Yeah, I only brought one, but
We have a single splat for you
Yeah.
today.
sorry.
Awesome.
There are plenty of single splat games.
Yeah, we're also located in Boston, so if anybody ever wants to come and like stomp on lots of splats, we can do that too.
I think we do want that. The Blockley team is very excited to stomp on the splat.
Well, next time.
2 questions over here.
Hello. Wonderful presentation. One thing that I noticed is that there's a lot going on with like changing how the classroom looks and integrating with lots of different subjects and programming. And so I was wondering, like from a curriculum development angle, how do you sort of see your like main goal in the classroom? Like what, like do you want everyone to become programmers? Like how do you like think of it in your head?
I'll start on that one. So one thing that we've talked a lot about is our main goal is really not to create like an army of unruly programmers. Really instead to, again, provide as many meaningful tie-ins as possible to students. And so that I think is really reflected in our curriculum of we have like our math, for example, our math curriculum right now has actually only coding extensions. It's very focused instead on math concepts themselves and playing and getting students out of their seats. And I think that's the benefit of working with an entire school, and that there are different places within a building to do different things, and recognizing that, in PE, it might not be the time to be sitting down and actually like really diving into what you're going to be doing with a particular coding concept, instead really seeing it happen in real life with games. And so our focus right now is on providing like really a baseline framework for all of the core parts for a grade level teacher as well as resource teachers throughout the building, so that there's at least a place to start, and then providing enough meaningful places to extend afterwards. But making sure that every teacher has like a really easy place to start, knowing that it is a resource that's available within their whole school. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I don't think so. And just, STEM identity is sort of our focus, as Emily mentioned before, rather than computer science.
Great. Evan, I think you might have been next.
Yeah, I just have a quick question about the GPT stuff.
Yep.
So when we were working on the first iteration of Aptly at the beginning, which I spoke on yesterday, we did try working with the XML representation quite a bit, but it felt like it put a lot of constraints on the prompt engineering because XML is so verbose and you only get so many input tokens. How did you work around that, or are the workspaces just small enough generally that you don't have to worry about the token limits in GPT?
We've been doing mostly snippets, in our testing, but we also we put the whole company through a 5-week class by Future AI. And most, like the engineers did the technical track. Anyway, and everyone else did the business logic track. And we've been playing with, in that class, we've been playing with Llama Index. And so we're looking at creating our own embeddings based on our custom blocks on top of that. But yeah, that's we've been mostly doing small bits of code now. So we're still working that out.
Great. Jamie?
Hi, I was curious to know if you think that when doing creation, is most of the creation of the games on the teachers, or do the students create most of the games, both in terms of like conceptualizing of the game in their heads and in terms of actually implementing it in the blocks?
I don't think you're going to like this answer, but it's both. It depends where you are in the school day. So typically, in an ideal world, there should be game creation happening from students. That's, I think, our hope. But we also recognize that in a lot of schools, that's not necessarily a reality, especially if there's no dedicated time during the day. There's lots of different competing priorities. So oftentimes, what we'll then do as a good next step is work with teachers we'll oftentimes build code that teachers will come up with, or that students have come up with as well. But ideally, it is going to be with some students, but whenever we don't have that time, oftentimes we'll rely on teachers as well. We also have a lot of things that are out of the box, so it'll be a lot of modifying existing games too. So either if that's coming from a particular unit or if it's just a game that lives in the app as well. We think that game creation can look a lot of different ways. So you can take an existing game and completely change the rules, and it's still a new game. And so really kind of meeting people where they're at. I don't know if that answered your question.
I think that does. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. We'll take one virtual question and then go back to the room. Mark asked, do you have to load your custom XML definition to the LLM so GPT can recreate the blocks?
That is, yeah. So in that case, for creating the blocks, we give it some context. We give it basically our block definitions, and then it can generate them. It can generate the XML just from that. But we're looking at instead of embedding everything in the prompt, using embeddings and this Llama index.
Great. Christopher?
I noticed on one of your slides you had the comment no robots, and I feel like maybe there's a story there. Is there some particular reason that made it onto the slide?
No, not really. Yeah, maybe. Sometimes we talk about we reference the box of broken spheros in the closet, or we use that as an example of hardware that doesn't get used. So we don't want to be a hardware that doesn't get used.
I think the other, I don't even remember what that was on the slide. Did you sneak that in somewhere?
Yeah, I think I would.
Okay. I think the other thing too is just the play pattern we're trying to encourage. So we think there's lots of wonderful things that are going to be used in addition to Splats, but I think the play pattern we want to see is lots of students out of their seats and interacting with each other, and less of one student watching one thing or a group of students watching one thing, but more of interacting with each other. And so sometimes we use that as a play pattern thing that we try to make sure that we're designing towards in curriculum or just even in the app as well.
Thanks.
Last question, and then we'll move on for time's sake. Is Splat available in Canada?
It is.
It is.
Amazing.
Yeah, and we're actually, Nova Scotia is our biggest customer.
Well,
Almost.
yeah. But Nova Scotia, I think half the elementary schools in Nova Scotia have Splats. So,
Amazing.
yeah,
How did they
we're
do?
definitely in Canada.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, both. Back to you, Rachel.